Howdy folks, welcome back to my channel. As you can see here, we have the WLToys 104001 on the desk. I was filming a video on maintenance issues, specifically the shocks and the diffs, and I decided to kind of pivot, and rather than focus specifically on the shocks and the differentials, I thought I would make a sort of must-do video for the WLToys 104001. There's three things with an honorable mention that if you have this vehicle, you probably need to look at doing. So first things first is you have to address the differentials. I know a number of guys have made videos specifically addressing the differentials and the lack of lubrication and the lack of grease inside them. So I have a segment filmed of tearing apart the front and rear differentials and packing them with grease and silicone. And with the rear differential specifically, I tore out the gears inside because the factory grease was caked and not in contact with any of the rotating surfaces. After differentials, next thing is shock maintenance. You need to check your shocks from the factory. All four of mine were loose enough to allow shock oil to either stay on the shock shaft or leave the seal and gather on the wheel. You'll see some photos pop up of the pool when I had the buggy parked for a week, and when I came back there was a puddle of fluid here that sat right here from the shocks. I'll show you some photos of what that looked like. So first thing, check your differentials and pack them with grease. Second thing, make sure you check the tightness of the seals and for the proper fluid level, and maybe address the weight depending on what type of activity you do with the buggy. You may need to change the weights. The third item is good practice regardless of manufacturer. However, with the vehicles that come from overseas, it's especially important. You're going to want to take a look at all of the fasteners on the vehicle. If you watched my brushless video, you realized these two, which go to the motor mount, were not very tight at all, and some of them were so loose, in fact, that the ratcheting mechanism in my screwdriver wouldn't activate. So make sure you check all the screws on the bottom side, flip the vehicle over, check all the screws inside the tray for the shocks, the wing mount, the suspension towers, or shock towers, the steering. Just get a screwdriver, make sure all the screws are nice and snug. The final bullet point in the honorable mention is the suspension geometry, particularly dealing with the toe out on the front and the camber on the rear. Most vehicles require some camber on the rear to allow it to corner effectively, but if you can tell by the wear on the tires, the camber is excessive. There's hardly any wear or very biased wear towards the inside, which is due to the negative camber in the rear, and some people have noticed in the front, and actually some people have mentioned in videos, prior videos, that the toe out on the front seems excessive. I've tried to address this one, and I'm not 100% sure if the adjustment on the arm is actually enough to bring it back into to spec, or at least what looks vertical. To be fair, I don't have the calibration gauges that you put on the wheels to determine what angle you're at, so I'm just going by eyeball. Anyway, you would use something like a Allen wrench and insert it into the hole on these little turnbuckles, and then move it back and forth to lengthen and shorten the threads in the link depending on what you're looking for. This is probably too much toe out no matter what you're doing, so you probably want to bring lengthen these rear arms or these rear links so that the front of the wheels comes this way more. If it's something you're interested in, I might make a full suspension setup video. I did find some specs on the X-Ray XB4, which is what we believe this is based off of. So if you're interested in doing or seeing some kind of suspension setup, I'll gladly film me messing around with that calibration gauge for 30 minutes or so. Anyway, that's the three main maintenance things that you need to look at and address to keep your buggy happy. And the honorable mention, which was the suspension setup, specifically the wheel alignment and the geometry for that. I think what we're going to do for this video is break it up into an intro part where we're talking about the three items, and then I'll include the clips that I've filmed for the front and rear diff maintenance and for the shocks. I did film segments to completely disassemble the rear and add the grease, and same thing for the shocks, front and rear, both ends. So we're going to stack this by doing the discussion first, and then we'll slide into the service part. I also filmed some onboard clips with the GoPro mount here right after the service. Unfortunately, the bald tires made it a bit of a spin session, but I thought it looked pretty cool, so I'll include that at the end of this. Anyway, let's get into the service. Alright, so as you can see here, I've just taken the shock out, and there's fluid all over it. It doesn't appear to be damaged. It does kind of stick right there. The shaft looks pretty straight, but there's no fluid left in it. Well, if there is, it's very little. Let me take this apart and we'll take a look at what's going on here. They do look like pretty nice shocks. Everything seems to be, yeah, you can tell. So, not to cut myself off, but that's how you can tell it was all spring rebound, or spring dampening, because the fluid isn't pushing the shaft back out. But like I was saying, they seem to be pretty decent shocks. Everything's all aluminum, adjustable. It's just this, for whatever reason, this particular one is pretty leaky. And like I said, I did tear it apart once already. Oh, there's still some fluid in it. I guess it's about a quarter filled. I don't know if you can see it. Anyway, let me drain this out, and then we'll top it off. I have some. I think what I have left is I have 30, 50, and 60. I think I'm gonna do 30, or I do have this. I don't know what this is. This is just some undocumented fluid that came with my G-Made shocks. It feels probably closer to 10, so if there's enough in here to fill it, I might just actually do that. It looks very similar consistency. Anyway, let me clean this out and take a look at it. Alright, looks like I'm gonna have to use the mystery fluid. The only one I have enough to do all the shocks with is 60 weight, and I feel like that's going to be too heavy for this. So I'll have to order some more. So we're going to go with the G-Made Mystery Fluid. I don't know if you can see it, but the disc is making very tiny little air bubbles. I think there's another interesting part to these shocks that I haven't seen anyone mention. On the cap and the bottom of the body itself, there's these flat spots for wrenches. Sometimes it can be pretty difficult to remove these caps, and something like the Arma, they usually have you do this weird thing where you put either put a screwdriver or an Allen wrench. I try to use these little picks I got from Harbor Freight when I can. You put those through the eyelet and turn it, but this has little flat spots for a wrench. It's pretty neat. Yeah, it looks pretty good. You want it to rebound out about a quarter. Might be a little too much. It's alright. Better than nothing. Actually, I think we might have just solved the problem. I don't know if you guys caught that, but this bottom, I don't know what this is. This bottom cap wasn't screwed in all the way. Maybe that's the source. All right, we'll get this. Let me get some cleaning materials. I'm gonna take the grit off of the threads here, and we'll get the shock put back together. All right, so this is one of the things I use to kind of clean the debris out. I started having to do this with the big rock. A lot of debris kicks up through those holes in the bottom, which coincidentally I have to make a video on it, but I think I found a fix for it that's a little more elegant than just taping over the hole, but that's another video. I don't want to speak out of phrase before we test it here, but I believe we may have solved the problem. I don't know if I loosened that cap. I don't think so, because I was already looking at the shock, so I feel like it just came loose from the factory, and I'd never tried to retighten it. But it feels like that's probably why it was leaking. A little more evidence to always make sure you check for nuts and bolts and all the screws being tightened and stuff like that. I didn't on this one, and maybe that's why. Maybe that's why that happened. I missed it. In case you are new to it, you basically rebuild the shock the same way. Put the spring on, compress the spring, slip the cap with the slotted section over the shaft, and then let the spring pressure put it down. There you go. Alright, so we'll get this back installed. Just for the sake of thoroughness, I'm probably going to take off the other front one and take a look at it. The rear seems fine to me, so I'm going to wait till I get more oil, but since I got a little more left in this little container here of the mystery oil, I'm going to do the other front for now. I probably should clean off this arm too. I'll probably take it outside and blow it out with some compressed air. Alright, so we got the other shock off. We're going to disassemble it. A little crunchy. Seems like it might be overfilled because it's rebounding all the way out. Again, I'm going to claim ignorance here a little bit because I don't know if maybe a buggy is supposed to have more rebound. I was always told that it has to come out about a quarter to half. And that's definitely all. Oh yeah, did you see that? That was loose too. This one didn't leak, but it was loose. I wonder if this has maybe something to do with the amount of damping or the oil release or something. I'll need to do a little bit of research. If you guys know why this is threaded, let me know in the comments. Anyway, let's take a peek at what's inside here. There we go. Definitely seems a little overfilled. I'm going to probably take a little bit out and then go halfway with the rest of this fluid. It's not very scientific, but I usually just dip a paper towel and let the quilting of the paper towel soak up a little bit. A proper method might be to maybe weigh them or use some sort of graduated container. Alright, that looks about half. We're going to leave a little bit of room for the diaphragm to compress. Tighten it up, give it a test. Oh, it's still very springy. I'll take a little more out. We'll come back when I have this settled. Okay, the shocks are refilled, cleaned, and back together. So I'm going to put them back in the vehicle, and then we'll start looking on how to disassemble the chassis for getting access to the diffs. Alright, the shocks are back installed. It's been sitting for about 30 minutes, and I don't see any new oil coming out of that shock, so I think we're okay. I think that solved it. It must have been the cap on the bottom that was the issue. About a week has passed since I had done the front end of the vehicle. I had a work trip, so I wasn't able to complete the service on the back part, and I wanted to get the pinion video out first. So the rear diff and the rear shocks haven't been dressed yet. I'm going to attempt to show that today. So as you can see, the wing is back on. In my opinion, it's easier to work with the wing off. Personally, I like the styling without the wing. I may look into taking these posts off. You can see in my B camera shot what I'm talking about. I really like the kind of sleek angle of it. Maybe there's a way to put something flat, like a race wing or something like that. But I really like the way that looks. Anyway, that's not what we're here to do. So the first thing is you're going to want to take your screwdriver, and it's probably better with a socket, but all of my tools that I usually use for this are at a job site, so I'm left with my B kit. If you're performing the maintenance on this and taking the shocks off and stuff like that, and you're okay with the performance you have, and you're not going to make any geometry changes, it's important to note, I suppose, at least in my scenario, was that if you look in the B camera, there's a set. There's 1, 2, 3 holes available for the shock position screws to go in. The factory position is in the middle hole. I've mentioned this a couple of times to folks I've been talking to on Reddit, and some other people that have gotten in touch with me about this, specifically this vehicle with the brushless kit. And one of the things I tell them to be cautious of, as you can see here, the brushless kit is very abusive to the tires. I mentioned that in the other video that these might be carpet spec. I was just on a work trip in Las Vegas, and I had stopped into a hobby shop on my way to the airport, and I spoke with some folks there, and they're familiar with the vehicle, although they don't necessarily have any, but they're familiar with the vehicle this is based off of, which is that X-Ray XB4. And they kind of mentioned that the really soft compound tire typically is for carpet. So it kind of goes along with what everyone is saying, where it's very likely that these specs are kind of a hodgepodge of the of both models of the X-ray. Anyway, you can see here, we'll focus this a little better. If you take a look, there's a lot of debris in the tubes here. I have a feeling that there's not going to be a lot of fluid left in this. I didn't see any signs of leakage, but it's got the stereotypical caking and the buildup of dirt that kind of lets me believe that it did probably leak. If you remember from the first part of the video, these caps were loose. I haven't touched it, and it is loose. So we are 3 for 3 on that portion of the shocks being loose. So you can take your detail brush the gunk off, clean the cap out a little. I picked a few sets of these up to detail my truck, and they've just been really useful for stuff like this. And you'll be able to see in here how much dirt has picked up in this wheel, maybe from the oil. There's a ton of dirt in there. Alright, so we got this one off. Let's take a quick peek at fluid level. Oh, wow. It's actually pretty good. If anything, it might be a little high still. Let's check the rebound. It's going about halfway. Alright, so I guess we'll just tighten that up. I'm going to take a little bit of fluid out and put a little of the 60 weight in it. I'll leave some of what's in there, which I believe is somewhere between a 20 and a 40, and I'm going to make it a little stiffer with this 60. I'm going to do the same process I did, where just soak up a little bit of it with a nice porous paper towel. Leave a little space. And then typically you want to push all the air bubbles out with the diaphragm, but there doesn't really seem to be any bubbles in this. Maybe because it's set for the week, pretty much. I didn't run it today. Anyway, that's the shock maintenance. Clean out some of the debris down here. I was going to work on a Punisher video today because it is by far my most neglected vehicle with my recent work schedule. It's the vehicle I've recorded the least amount of footage with, so I was going to go run it today, and my 6S, I only run it with a single 6S pack with an XT90, and my 6S pack didn't have any voltage left in it. It was too low for even the cell checker to check. So I got a new one of those coming. I'm leaving Monday, which today is Sunday evening, or Sunday early morning, like 1 a.m. I'm leaving tomorrow for Nashville for a week, so I probably won't have that real soon. I believe it should be here Thursday-ish. Looks like the same thing's going on with this one, where there's a ton of caked up dirt on the bottom. It doesn't appear like from this other side that maybe it leaked a whole lot. So maybe those caps being loose on the bottom doesn't necessarily mean it's leaking most of the fluid, but enough of it is coming out where it's causing the dirt kicked up from the street and the wheels to cake onto these components. I'll see if I can show you a close-up look of what it's looking like. And just to reiterate, or just to show, this, I only run this one on pavement. This one hasn't really been in any dirt. So for it to be that gnarly from being driven on pavement, that's pretty nasty. Also, you can see, I'll show you on the close-up cam there how wet the dirt is. Let me see that over here. It doesn't want to focus over there, so I don't know if you can see it, but the dirt specifically right here is soaking wet. Well, again, not that bad, but it definitely leaked down the shock tube and onto the arm down here. They must have either really overfilled it, or whatever's spitting out from the that little cap on the bottom not being tight is really just a superficial coating that's picking up dirt. I think before we go to crack open the diffs, I think I'm going to leave the shocks off while we take a look at the diffs. I think just to lube these little seals down here, I'm going to throw a little dash of 3-in-1 on there. Something's wrong with this one. It's not damping properly. Yeah, you can see some bubbles in there. What some people do is build like some kind of a holder or stand to let the air come out on its own. I don't know if it's necessarily that important on this level vehicle. For competition, I definitely would. I'd probably do this the night before or something like that. It seems to be rather important for those guys. There we go. A little more rebound back. Alright. That shock is good to go. Put this one back together. And we'll leave these off the buggy but assembled for now while we take a look at the diff. Diff access is very easy. It appears like on the front diff cover it's this screw and this screw, and then on the bottom of the chassis it would be this screw and this screw. That should give access. And if you've probably watched some of the other videos, specifically the maintenance ones, you'll probably know that these diffs come with almost no or no oil in them, and the diff gears are probably not greased. So that's why we're taking this apart. Is I've ran this a few times without actually looking at it. Hopefully we didn't do any damage, but you know, if we did, It's not that expensive. My one concern is about getting replacement parts. I found a site that lists all of the parts for the vehicle. If I can find it again, I'll link it in the description. But it doesn't show prices for individual pieces. It also doesn't show like any sort of estimated delivery time or something like that. So it, you know, if you did break something or wanted a replacement diff or an arm or something, and you couldn't find something like from an X-ray or something that was similar, you know, it might take a while to get these. Some of the bigger YouTube channels got theirs very early, or not very early, but earlier than me. I was one of the first to place the order for this with MakerFire, and I got mine. I placed the order, I think, first couple days in February, and I got mine pretty late. I think it was the last few days of March. Alright, let's see. This should come. Hey, look at that. Diff cover right off. So those top two screws here. This one, and the bottom two. There is not a drop of grease on this gear. I don't know if you can see it. Not a single drop. Alright, let's take this out. Do a little inspection. See if we caused any damage. So one thing I see right away from looking at this that other folks complain about on other vehicles is the groove where the dog bones rest in these outdrive cups. There seems to be a little wear where the dog bone pins sit. It doesn't seem to be near as aggressive as like the voltage, the Armagranite voltage, where the pins waller out the cups at all, or same thing with the Kaiju. The Kaiju is pretty famous for that because a lot of folks tend to run it on 6S. But there is a little bit of wear there, so it might be something to keep an eye on. The bearings feel pretty good. I always like to, after I remove a diff, I always like to mark the side the gear goes on. Just going to put a little mark right there. We're definitely going to add grease to this. This is the stuff I use. We're going to add some of this to it. And I'm going to break this open and see what kind of fluid, if any, is in there. A lot of these are known for not using, especially on the lower end, for not using a gasket or something like that to allow the use of like actual diff fluid. So people tend to pack them with grease. I did read a blog post from someone that says that these are sealed with the gasket so you can put a proper fluid in there. I don't know what the stock weights are. I sent an email to one of the contacts I have from the MakerFire Facebook group and asked for the shock weights and the diff oil weights for maintenance, what the factory recommendation is. And they're right, there's a gasket in there. So we can put proper fluid. There does appear to be some kind of a grease, but it seems it's very hard. And it doesn't appear to be in contact with any of the teeth. If you look at the gears, there doesn't appear to be any on there. It just kind of congregated in the middle. I'm going to put a little silicone oil in there, and I'll probably just put some 50 weight fluid just to have something in there. I might even put a little dab of the marine grease on all these teeth. I got this stuff from Beach RC silicone oil. I'm going to put a little bit in here. Alright, I like to put a little bit of silicone gear oil in there. This is a 3-in-1 oil. I just put a couple drops. We'll put these screws in, and then we'll put some of the marine grease on this outer gear, and I'll put a dab on the inside the diff housing and on the smaller gear. But that's why sometimes doing your research on these is important. All of those guys were right. If you would continue to run this brushless or brushed for a while, you would have done some damage to these gears. That the grease they put on the inside was not in contact with any of the gearing surfaces, and there's, you know, as you can see here, it's bone dry, not a drop of grease on these gears at all. And even though they don't feel bad, there's no crunchiness in them at all, probably still going to throw a little bit of lube on the bearings just because I have it out. I use the Battle Lube from Beach RC. There's a link to that and the silicone liquid I use in the description. Here's the bearing lube. Actually, it's probably going to help a lot. If you see, this one doesn't really rotate. This one has quite a few rotations on it now. It wasn't crunchy or anything. I didn't notice any debris in it, but they definitely roll a lot better. Oh yeah, it's a big deal. Big difference. Before I tried to do this, the gears wouldn't spin. Now they feel really good. Definitely, if you haven't already and you have one of these, do some diff maintenance. At the very least, open it up and put something inside here. Alright, I had a little bit of trouble getting the diff out, so I'm going to try to arrange this off camera, and then we'll come back and we'll do a close-up of putting the oil on the inside. Alright, so it worked out a lot easier this time. What I did was I took off the linkage right here. This one, the top one, that allowed me to rotate the wheel in and out to lengthen and shorten the dog bone inside the outdrive cup. If you're having trouble removing it, you should just undo these, and it should be a lot easier. Now the diff's in the vehicle. I'm not going to use the Q-tip this time, but take something like a flathead screwdriver, or in this case I'm using a pick, and just try to touch the gears in the back while you roll it. And I put a little on the case itself, right where it rolls into. So if you look here, put a little right there, let it roll into it, and touch the gear in the back where you have a gear rotating this way and the gear rotating this way, right where they converge. Try to let this run in between there and just rotate it back and forth. I guess if you're bundling this, the maintenance with the shocks and the diff together, you might already have the shock off, and if you do, it's probably going to make it easier to get the diff back into place. So maybe try doing that. Since this service is, like I said, you'll likely perform both of these service together. You might only need one because one side will definitely slip in, but if you have the shocks already out, you might as well take the diff out, do the maintenance, put it back, put the diff back first, and then put the shock back on. Seems like it's gonna be the easiest for me. Alright, I got a quick note about reassembling the housing. I found it easier to put the bottom two in first loosely to align the bottom holes and then do the top ones. I was having a lot of trouble getting the bottom two to align when these two were in even loose. So if you have that kind of trouble, put the diff cap on, put these two in first, and then put the front two on. And if you get confused with the screws, the shorter ones go up top and the longer ones for the bottom. They're a little bit shorter than the shock screw. Alright, so there we have it. Front shock and diff maintenance done. Let me clean this up and then we'll start to look at the back. So I haven't taken it apart yet, but I believe it's going to be this screw, and then the two black ones on this plate on the bottom here. I'll show it on this camera also, just in case. So I think it's going to be this screw, and then these two. This one, and this one. Okay, so the rear diff was exactly the same as the front diff. It's the two on top of the diff case, and not the ones through the hinge pin plate that I thought, but the two on the bottom of the chassis. Not the closest two to the back, but the ones before it closest to the outside. So this one, and then the two on the diff cover themselves. And as you can see, coming on my B cam here, completely empty. There is no lube on that gear at all. I'm going to pop the steering link or the suspension links off just to get them out of the way. We'll pull the dog bone out and see if we can't slide this diff out here. There we go. So no grease or lubrication of any kind on the differential gear itself, and nothing in the cubby for it. And I'm pretty sure, like the other one, it feels very similar. There's probably nothing inside here, or very little bit of the that kind of cheapy grease. I'm going to turn the cameras off for this. I'll tell you what I'm going to do. We're going to pull these 4 screws off. I'm going to put this Lucas marine grease in there. I'll probably add a dab or two of the 3-in-1 silicone oil. And I'm going to use Battle Lube on the bearings. And then we'll put it back together. I'm also going to clean off some of the suspension components that have the dirt in here. And as we button it back up, I'm going to put some of the grease, the Lucas marine grease, on the ring gear here, and also on the smaller gear inside the cavity, and then we'll pack some in the case. Alright, I'm just about to break open the diff, and you'll be able to see it with me as we crack it open. That's one of the negatives of this coin is the way that the ship's increases that very delicate gasket. Oh yeah, look at that, man. Man, that is... It's really grody. Yeah, take a look at that in there. It's yuck. But it's not on any of the metal contact surfaces. It's just sitting on the shafts between them. And this stuff looks particularly nasty, so what I think I'm going to do is I'm probably going to take these apart and get all this original grease off of it, and then I'll repack it with the marine grease. Let me do this off camera because it's probably going to take a while, and then we'll come back. So just as a tip, as you're cleaning the smaller gears, I'm finding that I need to use something like one of these picks to actually get it out from the channels that the gears make, because the pressure from just being impacted in there has made it so like that grease just doesn't move that well. So pick up some picks or a brush, or I think actually in the next few weeks I'm probably going to tear this whole thing apart and then put these components in maybe a sonic wash or something like that. I happen to have a sonic parts cleaner. Maybe I'll put the diff components in there. Anyway, just wanted to show you guys that the impacted grease is so tight on inside these little channels that I had to actually like carve it out with something like a pick. Alright, let me finish packing these and then we'll come back when it's all assembled. And another quick note, just to show you how little grease there is in there, I haven't touched the inside of this yet, and there is almost nothing except a little bit right here on the case. There's no grease on the gear itself, just on the case, the top part of the case, and not even all the way around. It's literally just in this section and a little right here. See it? And that's it. Okay, the diff is back together, and we're going to just check these bearings. They're not crunchy, but they don't roll that well, so we're going to add a little bit of this bearing lube to it. Take this one off. I mean, you'd be surprised at how much just a little bit of that lube, how far that goes. Like we did on the front, I marked the side the diff gear is on, so we know it goes in this way. Let's go ahead and pop we'll lay down the wheels. Actually, before we do that, I want to make sure that I get the back gear with the grease. case here. Right where the ring gear spins. And I like to put a little around the housing here to kind of create a little bit of a barrier for any dirt that might get in there. Drop that wheel in there. This one looks good. Perfect. Take a little more grease. Put it on the gear itself. We'll put the cover back on, clean these out a little bit. See if there's any debris in here. Snap those suspension links in. Then we'll flip her over. Put in these 2 screws on the bottom. Alright, there we go. Diff serviced, back on the vehicle. We'll get these shocks back on and we'll give her a test. Okay, we're back. All 4 corners are done. Both diffs are serviced and all the screws are tightened. We are basically where we should have been a few weeks ago if I were a good RC owner. Anyway, we're here now. Since everything's finished, I'm going to get the wing back on, we'll charge the battery up, and we'll do another speed run tomorrow and see if the service and the shocks, as well as lubing the bearings, will help us pick up another mile an hour or 2. Anyway, that's it for now. Stick around for the speed run. Don't forget to subscribe, and thanks for watching.